Just to mention that Lawrence Rockefeller would go on to fund several UFO enthusiast conferences and panels in the 1980s and 90s, working essentially to divert the UFO community's attention away from experimental military tech, by the way, a field that he was very invested in, and towards unproven alien tech. Given Lawrence's closeness to intelligence and the defense industry, I would speculate that his funding of UFO groups was working within the confines of a pre-existing psychological operation to divert attention away from encounters of experimental military tech.
This is kind of important because it makes mention that the U.S. government was involved in funding programs like as far back as War of the Worlds, where there was a radio broadcast trying to convince people that aliens were landing on Earth and that there was an invasion to see how many people would buy into it. It's almost like an MK Ultra mass subversion to try to see what the public would react to and what they would believe. But then after that, the UFO phenomenon, now they call it UAP, it's the same thing, it's ongoing. They want to put forth the presumption or the perception to the public that the government has capabilities that they do not have currently, and that using the fact that there could be some external threat as a motivation to create a race between different nations so they can harvest technology, when essentially if we just stop producing technology for them, they can't build it without us. It requires scientists or people willing to be involved in these projects, and obviously they want to advance their skill sets if they went to school and make money in science, so therefore you gotta play ball. But there's a moral aspect to giving technologies to governments that can later on be weaponized against the people. There's been a constant threat of nuclear war used against all of us to push us into war, conventional warfare, since the advent of the nuclear bombs. In which case, if you look at the videos and that Stanley Kubrick was involved in the filming of a lot of the nuclear test footage, that and then you compare that to the lunar landings and whether or not these events actually took place, or if they were using some sort of film trickery, special effects to make images to basically scare the public, where the governments didn't actually have the technology. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with as grainy as those videos are, it could very easily have been faked on video. So, I mean, it's not just the lunar landings. Special effects and filmography have gone hand in hand since the beginning. 1939 was when Wizard of Oz was filmed, and at that time they were already trying to create special effects. And it wasn't until 1945 that Hiroshima and Nagasaki took place, supposedly.
I put some questions to Dr. Dennis Hauck, North American director of the International UFO Registry. Some of these mysteries, like the Nazca Plains, how would you explain them?
I think the Nazca Plains have been mistreated in the literature. There's much more information there than is generally available. The Nazca Plains have been presented as so much graffiti which the extraterrestrials put on the plains for our enjoyment or their enjoyment. And actually, there's a great many more mysteries involved there. The Nazca Plains have only been known to mankind for 30 years. They were discovered by a commercial airline pilot. And if you're down on the ground in the plains, you see no marks. You see nothing. It's just a grassy area. In fact, the Pan American Highway was built right across the plains. No one noticed anything. But from a commercial airliner or from an airplane, you can see bits of the Nazca Plain. The Nazca Plain is 300 square miles around, and you really can't see the entire plain unless you're in space. The entire plain is very much covered with hematite, which is iron oxide. And as far as being a spaceship going to a planet, and if you were to do a magnetospheric survey of the planet, which we might assume would be done, the Nazca plains would stand out like a red light. They would be a distortion of the field because of the rich iron deposits there. It's by far the biggest area on the planet Earth of this type of iron oxide deposits. The plain itself, when we look at the iron deposits, we find that there are actually rails running slightly below the ground. They're rusted now, but they're probably about 1,500 years old, perhaps 1,000 years old. We have
about the same age as the
plain itself and the markings.
The markings on
right.
the plan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The railings are about 22 feet apart, and when we think now, what could they be used for? We have a number of connections. One thing, the average size, average diameter of UFOs that we see today happens to be 21.5 feet. A very close coincidence there.
Do you think that they visited ancient man by example and perhaps with actual help, implanted ideas that became the inspiration for many of the mysteries that we now think of as the mysteries of the gods?
This is the key, I think, to an intelligent understanding of the ancient astronauts' effect on our lives in the past and present. The people, I don't think, these artifacts that we find that are so hard to explain do not fit in the culture. They do not fit the religious customs of the culture. It seems like there was a tremendous inspiration to make these artifacts on the part of the people. And I think that this inspiration finds its source with extraterrestrial intervention.
I spoke again with Dr. Dennis Hauck. As a mathematician, you're eminently qualified because of your training to observe and analyze UFOs. What got you interested?
I became interested while I was in graduate school in Vienna, Austria. We were on a skiing holiday to Innsbruck, Austria, and myself and two companions had come upon a UFO as we went over a ridge on the Nordketten range. We saw the object, what we thought was an object, hovering in front of a boulder about 250 feet in front of us across a small ravine. And it was grayish shaped, looked like it was spinning, at least it had that shimmering effect. And we were very excited. We threw up our skis and started running towards it. And as we approached the object, it actually disappeared in front of our eyes. And as I look back on the sighting, I think perhaps it was an optical illusion, but in any case, it got me very interested in the problem of UFOs.
You saw what you thought was a UFO then, a flying saucer. Looking back now with more information at your fingertips, you consider it now an aberration of nature, something that was naturally there that you took to be a UFO.
Correct. Yeah.
So we seem to have a problem in discriminating between what are unidentified flying objects and what aren't.
It's a major problem in ufology, I think.
Well, you have some pictures here that illustrate that pretty well. I think that, for example, here, number of photographs of things that, if you weren't knowledgeable, you could take to be unidentified flying objects, flying saucers, in fact.
Right. These show up in the field quite a bit and create what we call noise, bad reports. For instance, this one from the Gemini 7 shot, you see these pentagon-shaped objects that really are lens flares.
Right. And this one here, an obvious fake, huh?
It's a noctilucent cloud. It's a cloud that glows of its own accord from the static, which here are lenticular clouds, which are saucer-shaped clouds appearing over.
And then, something more mysterious, the real thing.
The real thing, at least what we believe to be the real thing.
Then you believe that there is such a thing as a UFO with an intelligence inside it that is not ours, not human.
I think that is one of the characteristics which we can assume UFOs behave in most cases in a linear fashion, a purposeful fashion. They do not, they seem to have a motive behind it. This is true in all categories: nocturnal lights, daylight disk, close encounters. We have this linearity of purpose and in many cases linearity of behavior. That is, they don't show up in one part of the sky and then just disappear and show up in another part. You can usually trace their motions and movements. They interact. They have this interactability with our environment and with our physical world. In other words, they leave traces. I was given like a 50-50% chance of living, and I went into I was dying, and As a child, that was a very pure death. It was like I just stopped caring about everything, didn't care about the pets, the family, television, nothing interested me at all. It was, as I look back, it wasn't like a depression, it was more like just dead, tired of everything. When something would happen, like somebody would come over to visit, I actually get nauseous because I didn't want to participate. I just wanted to be dead, mentally. I took to wearing black clothing all the time. And so the doctor told my parents to get me to get some sunshine. That would help restore the liver. And also to eat liver every night, have liver every day, which turned me into a vegetarian eventually. But, and so I did. My loving parents fed me liver every day. And we moved to the country. And it was a beautiful area in the prairie outside Chicago. And I was recovering, and the sunshine and maybe the liver, was starting to work, and I was coming back, and I had this connection with nature that was very pure, because I didn't have any thoughts, I didn't care about thinking, didn't care about having ambition or doing anything, but I sensed there was something going on still. In every moment, there was something going on. And in the field behind our house is where it really expressed itself. And I just wandered in the field and could feel the energy from plants and trees and the sand and the sun, it was really, and I was only connected because I was totally out of the way. I didn't care, I got very attracted to milkweed thistle, and used to break open the plants and drink the milk from milkweed. And when my parents found out, they forbid me to go in the field anymore because they thought it was poison, and everybody was telling me it was poison, but to me it tasted good. It was the right thing to do. And when I was later, when I was adult, I found out that milkweed has silymarin, which is a liver restorative. So it's that kind of intuitive connection with nature that we've lost by being separated from nature, by not being connected to those really subtle energies that the alchemists were connected to. They were philosophers of nature, and if you approach nature in that way, I think we can still connect. It's harder for adults to do things like that. But I had other experiences during that time when I was totally dead. Spiritizing experiences. I remember once in the backyard. It's going to sound crazy, but there was like a warm wind that came up and kind of swirled around and just kind of attracted my attention. And I followed it into the field and up and down paths, like there was something really there, But I couldn't see it, but it just felt warm and nice. Sounds crazy, but I followed this invisible wind, this solar presence, and I followed it. It ended up at an oak tree, and in front of the oak tree there was this big hole. It was like 8 feet deep, and somebody had dug it there, and I don't know why or anything, but I looked down the hole, and I could see the different strata of earth. There was a clay layer, and standing there on the edge, all of a sudden there was this, something started to form in the hole, halfway up the hole. It was like, first it was like a shimmering heat wave or something, and then it turned into this rotating ball of light. And it was very beautiful because it had all these colors and textures, and I don't know, maybe I was poisoned by the milkweed or something, but it was a profound experience of something really there, something more beautiful than anything I'd ever seen, something that was, even in my period of death and being near death, I wanted to see, and I wanted to be part of it, actually. I felt like jumping in to the pit and somehow becoming one with this light. I'm not at all sure the light was there or that anybody else could have seen it, but it was just a genuine experience. And I sat on the edge of that hole, and I was totally trying to hold myself back from jumping in, because I felt that like I would disappear if I jumped into this hole. And then all of a sudden I heard my mother's voice calling, and it was saying, "Danny, Danny," like she used to call me when I was outside to come home. And it couldn't have been her voice because I was like miles from home. But
that kind of broke this trance I was in, and I ran all the way home, and I threw myself on the kitchen floor, and she's doing dishes, and could never explain what happened. But that was an experience that kind of was a breakthrough experience for me, that there were these subtle energies, or these energies that weren't available all the time, that were out in nature, that were real. And I was very smart, I think, in trying to preserve that experience, not think about it, just kind of remember it without judging it. And I didn't start thinking about it really until I was in college later, and I thought all kinds of things. I thought maybe there was a UFO abduction, or in my psychological phase I thought it was molested somehow, and substituted a memory like that, like people sometimes do. And then I thought maybe it was some type of chemical imbalance, and it wasn't until I was in graduate school in mathematics at the University of Vienna, and for a lot of reasons that I'll go into more in the keynote lecture, mathematics was kind of at the end. It was being proven by mathematicians that mathematics was basically just a game that had no basis in reality, and that we were just really projecting our thoughts into science, and it was proven mathematically, and people aren't aware of that yet, that logic fails, and that there has to be another dimension there. And basically it ended up proving the existence of this other spiritual level of reality, or energetic level of reality. And it coincided with work in quantum physicists that actually found where this borderline is. It's called the Planck barrier, which is at 10 to the minus 33 centimeters and 10 to the minus 43 seconds. If you reach that space and time, everything dissolves into an energetic pattern that they call a quantum foam. And everything's in a potential state then. There's nothing exists there until you have a thought or a projection or something like that. Light hits it that organizes that quantum foam. So in quantum physics, they knew that there was an invisible realm there. They've proven it. And now in mathematics, they've proven that there's this invisible realm. So I was very confused, and had spent all this time in math, and so I went wandering through the Vienna Library, which is a building built in like 1280. Amazing to see things like that. And there was a room in the basement of the library that contained old alchemy books from the 1500s, 1600s, and I went in the room and I opened up some of these books, and it was like instant gratification from these drawings and images that were in there. And there were, especially in areas that spoke of the first matter, there were talks about balls of light forming in nature, sometimes by a tree, sometimes in a hole, sometimes by a brook. That was first matter. And first matter is something that is between matter and energy, or between the physical and the spiritual. And it's something that can become either. It's like the quantum foam in physics, and all those thoughts were coming together. And I realized that the alchemists were really talking about the same truths that we were just discovering or rediscovering.
They leave UFO rings.
There is some evidence of that too.
Yeah, there are some good examples here of rings.
Right here, of the burnt out areas. Where was this? In Australia?
That's Melbourne, Australia. And there are over 300 such rings seen in conjunction with UFO sightings. These aren't just patches in the ground, because there is a fungus which will cause these patches, but these are seen in conjunction with UFO sightings in numerous cases.
Can you deduce something of their characteristics, their intelligence, their motivation, by their actions?
Mathematically or logically, there's not much to deduce there. We haven't had any contact, and that in itself is a hint, I think, to the motivation behind the UFO occupants, if there is such a thing, or the UFO intelligences. They don't care about interacting with us, at least on our conscious level. They're not, they don't really care about meeting human beings at the present time. There's something about the way they act I don't like personally. There's a belief in the field that UFOs are benign, that they're here to save us. Sometimes I have to wonder about that belief, because simply the way they behave.
Well, what could you speculate would be their motivation? I mean, if it wasn't benign, would it be harmful?
Of course, there's a possibility, but I think they really don't care one way or the other. I think they're here perhaps for their own motives, which maybe we can't understand their motives, but whatever it is, I think it's wrong to think they're here to save the world, and I think it's wrong to think that they're here to destroy it.
I wonder if it's not an attempt by so many people to explain the inexplicable.
It's used that way. The very idea of UFOs is used that way. It's misused.
Yeah, religions, and all the way back to ancient Egypt, the idea that anyone, the main problem was the idea that anyone could reach the divine, that anyone could, through their meditation in their private chambers. In fact, the alchemist Bruno was burnt at the stake in a very horrible, they lit fires in stages so he'd suffer for hours and hours, and burned him alive just for saying one thing, and that was that I can reach the divine in my own chambers. I don't know that he was implying you don't have to go to church. The church is, and I'm not talking about Catholic people and their beliefs, I'm talking about the church. It's a corporation. It's like the first corporation, and they wanted to control the people. They replaced the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire invented corporation ideas with battalions and all, and the church is structured the same way. So the church becomes a blockage or a gateway where they want a toll to go through it. They want control, and they want to be that middleman. So like all corporations, and that's a real problem that the church had, I think, with alchemists.
In 1963, amateur astronomer Patrick Moore described a crater he discovered in a potato field in Wiltshire, which he assumed was caused by a fallen meteorite. In nearby wheat fields, there were several circular and elliptical areas where the wheat had been flattened in a geometric pattern. He believed they were caused by air currents from the impact since they led towards the crater. Astronomer Hugh Ernest Butler observed similar craters and deduced that they were likely caused by lightning strikes. These may have been the first witness accounts of this phenomenon reported in modern era before there was a term to describe them. These oddly ornate patterns came to be known as spiral flattening, more commonly called crop circles. In the early 1970s, even more bizarre geometric shapes began to manifest overnight in the wheat fields of Wiltshire, England. The designs at first were simple circles, giving rise to the name crop circles. But as the 70s and 80s went on, the patterns became more detailed and elaborate. These unexplained crop circles led by many to speculate that a new, mysterious, supernatural phenomenon was happening. It seems, however, that spiral flattening may have been much older than the 70s. Take the story of the mowing devil, for example, perhaps the earliest known reference to crop circles. The written account of England's mowing devil is dated to 1678 and tells of an incident in Hertfordshire.
Some believers remain convinced that the video is real. Some think John Wavy is a stooge for the government or military, trying to cover up something more sinister about crop circles.
As you know, it's been said that our brain is one of the biggest mysteries in itself. Are we not looking at something that is deep in our ancient history?
Indeed, we have a racial memory, perhaps, of visitations, or at least contact, when we were more primitive, perhaps, in a more primitive state. This entire thing about the quantum leap that the human race took towards intelligence and self-conscious behavior is very mysterious. There is a missing link, that there must have been intelligent interference at some time in evolutionary history. We know that apes and the humanoid types that we evolved from had 48 Y chromosomes, whereas today a human being has 46 X chromosomes, which is quite a change genetically, and there's a possibility, I think, that it was induced.